Hello, we're going to talk today about graduate routes, the routes you can take when you complete your current studies. My name is Stephanie Murray. I'm one of the Career and Employability Advisors here at the university. We're going to look today at both employment and postgraduate study options. The graduate job market in 2025. There's a lot going on in the graduate job market at the moment. Key trends that are currently shaping the UK job market are as follows. So I think the main points for you as you consider your options are, firstly, the actual number of graduate level jobs is falling. And one implication of this is obviously increased competition. When you apply for graduate level jobs, you will be up against many other applicants, and you need to seek advice on making your application stand out. That, together with the fact that if you can demonstrate skills from either projects during your studies or work experience, that will give you that competitive edge. Entry-level roles and tasks are changing, and some processes can now be fully automated, leading to reduced numbers being recruited. Consider roles where human judgment, creativity, interpersonal skills are still required. These are less easy to automate. And this leads to our final point, that soft skills, so transferable interpersonal skills, matter now more than ever. Employers are increasingly prioritising these interpersonal skills, such as communication, adaptability, teamwork. So please make sure you have examples of all these that you can demonstrate to prospective employers. The graduate job market in the UK is broadly speaking, made up of graduate schemes and graduate jobs, and we will look at these in turn. So graduate schemes cover a range of occupational specialisms. So, for example, finance, retail, marketing, law, engineering, just some of the examples. It's a structured training programme, usually by very large employers. So again, for example, the NHS, the civil service. Think of the biggest names in your specialist area, and the way they offer opportunities to graduates will usually be via a scheme. So big names in business and industry, and these schemes are designed to help develop future leaders and managers in those organisations. A scheme can last between 12 to 36 months. Applications open, now this might surprise some students, applications open a full 12 months before you graduate. So as you come into your penultimate year at university, the year before you graduate, that is the time that you should consider looking for opportunities to be available for the following year when you do graduate. And then the last 2 points, a graduate scheme is pretty much always or involves always a multi-stage recruitment process. So lots of different layers of interviews, tests, activities, that kind of thing. And again, a really key point, they are very, very competitive. Alongside schemes, I would suggest that graduates or students, graduates look at what we've, anything else that's not a scheme, what we describe as graduate employment. It can be one job, it can be a couple of jobs within an organisation. However, It does have some, it's less structured than a scheme and could be advertised within a small to medium size organisation. And applications tend to be ongoing, so it's definitely not as structured as a scheme in terms of the recruitment process, or the timing of the recruitment process, but it certainly can have similarities in terms of both the competitiveness and the actual stages within the recruitment. So, for example, tests, maybe a couple of interviews, group activities, that kind of thing. So these are some websites that advertise graduate vacancies. The top one there is our website, Student Hub, and I would always say start there. And from there you can find links to all these other areas, to these other websites, but some specifically within that. For example, there's a civil service, jobs within higher education, etc. But yeah, there are lots and lots of different websites out there specifically for graduate vacancies. So moving on to the second option. So, you know, not everyone wants to go into employment as soon as they finish their studies. They might be considering postgraduate study. So if you are, what are the options and the different qualifications and programs that are available? So we could broadly split postgraduate study into these areas: taught, higher degrees, taught courses. So by that we mean, you know, a range of master's courses, so an MSc, an MA, LLM in law, or an MBA. So where there's a high percentage of taught content. Research courses, so a master's by research, a PhD, that kind of thing, where obviously in the title, a large proportion of the course is by your research. And the other two, diplomas, certificates, or indeed professional qualifications, could be things along the lines of accountancy qualifications, or something that is specifically a requirement for a career. So, for example, a PGCE, a teaching diploma certificate. So why would you want to, or what are the reasons for wanting to study at or to undertake postgraduate study? So it could simply be the personal satisfaction of continuing to pursue a subject that you enjoy. It could be to prepare for a specific career, as we said on the previous slide, be that something like accountancy, law, or teaching. To enhance career prospects and progression. So, as again, at the beginning of the presentation, talks about how competitive it is out there. Would having a postgraduate qualification give you a bit of, you know, that competitive edge when competing for graduate positions? It helps to keep your options open. So as you go through your final year, you could apply for postgraduate study alongside looking for employment opportunities, and keep the two open, and therefore have a backup plan in case things don't quite work out as you'd hoped. And finally, students pursue postgraduate study as you know, because they enjoy the intellectual and academic development that they provide. So finally, if you do want to go down the postgraduate study option, do you find funding? Well, This may be a concern or a consideration, but there are some options. So the main message I want to leave you with is do your research. Make sure you find out what's available for you. And as with all things related to higher education and different options, have a look at our different sections on Student Hub and the prospects.ac.uk websites. So things like some of the following may be available depending on your course or your circumstances. So bursaries, postgraduate loans, research councils, charities, foundations and trusts, and individual universities and different courses themselves. Thank you for listening.